All right, guys. Well, welcome to all of our viewers. Thank you for being here for this middle grade readers for our middle grade novels for every reader. This is in conjunction with the 2021 Las Vegas Book Festival, which will have online components such as this and a face-to-face one as well. So we have 7 fabulous middle grade readers here today. And so I want to give you some space to please say your name, where you're at right now, and what book you would like to introduce us to, focus on right now. One of the beautiful things about being virtual is that we have lots of people from lots of different places. So it would be lovely to be face-to-face, but tell us where you're from. I'm gonna go with Jen first because you're the first one on my screen. Jen, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jen Calonita. I'm in New York on Long Island right now. And my next book is The Rise of Flynn Rider. I don't know if you could see this, but it's a new Disney middle grade series, and it's an origin story about Eugene Fitzherbert at age 12.
Thank you, Jen. Jessica, where are you at right now?
All right, I am Jess Redman. I am in Florida, and the book, my most recent book is The Adventure Is Now, which came out in May. And it's the story of Milton P. Green and the summer he spends on the lone island where he finds a field guide full of clues to a hidden treasure that he has to find to save the island.
Awesome, thanks, Jess. Veeda, tell us where you're at.
All right. Hi, I'm Veeda Bybee. I'm actually right here in Las Vegas with you all, although you're viewing virtually. The book I'm going to talk about is Lee on Angel Island, and it's written with the Smithsonian. It's a historical fiction about a young girl who comes from China, and she comes to immigrate through Angel Island. And so yeah, we'll be talking about that.
Thank you, Veeda. Tracey, tell us where you're at.
Hi, I'm Tracey Baptiste. I am in New Jersey, and I will be talking about my new middle grade nonfiction book, African Icons, 10 People Who Shaped History, which is about 10 people from African history from ancient times all the way up through about the 1500s who did like really incredible things for their country and for their continent and for the people all around the world.
Thank you, Tracey. Varian, where are you at?
Hey, y'all. I'm Varian Johnson. I'm right outside of Austin, Texas. And I have a book coming out really soon called Playing, brother, close to me, called Playing the Cards You're Dealt. It's about a 10-year-old kid named Anthony Ant Joplin, who is a bit of a card hustler. He's kind of trying to figure out what it means to be a young man in his community.
Awesome. Thanks, Varian. DJ, where are you at right now?
Hi, I am in Los Angeles, California, specifically Manhattan Beach, down by the water. And I don't have a new book coming out, but so it's like eeny, meeny, miny. What do I talk about? I'll talk about my most popular book, which is a 10-book series called Pendragon. First book is called The Merchant of Death, and it's the first book that I wrote, and it's to this day the most popular. But it's about a 14-year-old guy who's like got it, his whole life has got it going on, and everything's perfect until it isn't perfect, and he gets called upon to go on this adventure to essentially save all of time and space, that old chestnut. And it's called The Merchant of Death, Pendragon, The Merchant of Death.
Thanks, DJ.
I should find a copy of it someplace. I don't know.
You can find one while we talk to Lindsay. Where are you at, Lindsay?
Yourselves.
Hey guys, I'm Lindsay Currie. I'm in Chicago, Illinois, where it's currently melting temperature right now. I think it's like literally almost 100 at this point already today. The title I have coming out is What Lives in the Woods. This follows the story of my main character, who is obsessed with the idea of becoming a mystery writer herself. She's also really obsessed with Agatha Christie. She read one of her books for school and it really kind of latched onto it. And she gets sucked into a real life mystery though in Saugatuck, Michigan, in a decrepit rundown mansion her father is working on for the summer.
Thank you, Lindsay. What an amazing start to our panel. So since this panel is middle grade fiction for every reader, when we talk about middle grade, we're generally talking about like the 8 to 12-year-old range, right? It can go a little bit lower, a little bit higher. Would you guys agree with that, or do you want to extend on that at all?
I can give it a shot.
Thanks,
I think that one of the things that all middle grade novels have in common is that they're just really good stories, and good stories can be appreciated by anyone, no matter what your age. So people say, who reads your books? And I say that, well, kind of really good. It starts out with good readers who are like maybe in third grade. And then it starts going up fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. And then when you get to high school, it starts to tail off a little bit because kids have no time to read for pleasure. Unfortunately, they're so caught up in school and academics, and in college it goes down. As soon as college is over, whoop, the number starts to go up again because people are starting to read for pleasure again. So it's a weird kind of curve of who the books are for. But a good story well told is kind of ageless, I think.
Thanks, DJ. Anybody else want to chime in on the middle grade reader? All right, so I want you to think about yourself personally as a middle grade reader, and think about the novels that you just introduced to us. What parts of your middle grade self show up in your novels?
Ooh, I love this question so much because I feel like there was such a gap for me when I was that age in books. I really feel like it went from like Judy Blume to adult books. I just didn't feel like there was that much. And I was always kind of the quirky kid who liked spooky things and scary things. And while I think those things were out there, I just don't think there was as much for this age range. And I like writing those characters for the kids like me. I will never forget when I was in, I think maybe fourth grade, we had like a big science fair, and I was ready to knock it out of the park with this science fair. And I got there and everyone had done these really cool, but like very basic presentations where they tested different laundry detergents and things to show which ones worked better. I had reconstructed a skeleton that I found, an animal skeleton. And I remember everyone kind of looking at me and being like, ooh, that's a little bit weird. That's a little strange. She showed up with bones, but I like to write those quirks into my characters to show that it's okay to be a little different. It's okay to march to the beat of your own drum because it's all going to pan out fine and others will probably follow. I love that question.
It's middle grades, they always say middle school is the worst, right? That like whole middle grade age is very awkward, right? So it's nice for them to see that reflected in characters and think, hey, I'm like this kid. Anybody else want to chime in on their middle grade self?
I'll go. So I grew up in the Caribbean, so it was a British system, so really quite different than the experience that you guys would have had growing up here. So we didn't have really the sort of middle school carved out the way that you guys had it, but there was still that very awkward time in your life where you're sort of like, am I a child? And I can be a child at one moment, and I'm a grown person and I can make my own decisions and I'm an independent thinker. You're always vacillating between those two things. And I definitely was at this time. And I was somebody who's like really curious about a lot of things and wanted to know stuff and understand stuff. Like I never got out of that, why phase, like how little kids are like, but why? But I never really got out of that part for me. So I'm probably like best known for my fantasy series, The Jumbies, but the book that I'm talking about now is nonfiction and something, I've written nonfiction, but it's not something that I'm really known for. And the reason that I took on this particular series of topics was because I really wanted to know more about African history and African peoples before they were taken and forced into slavery. I was like, well, something must have happened before that, right? Mm-hmm. And it's that same curiosity that I had when I was a kid. It's like, well, you need to be able to explain this to me. Like, what exactly is the situation here? Like, something must have happened first. Like, what happened before? What came before? What were they doing? And that's really the kind of thing that I was thinking about as I was working on this. So this is a very satisfying, 10-year-old Tracey kind of book, like satisfying my curiosity.
I love that. Thank you, Tracey, for bringing more of a global perspective to the conversation. That's awesome. I know I wonder about things too. And I always wonder, like, how come I don't know this story, right? Like, how come it wasn't taught to me? Like, maybe I wasn't paying attention, but more often than not, it just probably wasn't part of the narrative, right? Mm-hmm. Anybody else want to share their deep, dark, middle grade personalities and how they're reflected in your stories? Oh, see, now everybody's going.
Jumping in.
Totally middle grade perspective, right? Let me wait for somebody else to go before I pop in. All right, fight over it. Who's going first?
Well, I'll jump in really quick. Tracey, I really like what you said about learning so much about your own history. I've been having to write a lot of historical fiction, and it's been so eye-opening to me to see the different things that haven't been told. Like, for instance, the story I'm writing about this girl who's going to Angel Island. I was born in Oakland, California, and I lived in the Bay Area for some of my life, but I didn't realize that Angel Island was this pretty much a detention center. And so it's been really neat to have this like honor of telling stories for kids to know in a fictional way, and having that time to, those kids who lived in the 1920s, they have the same feelings as kids now do. They do different circumstances, but the same core feelings as I did as kids back then. And it's been a really great discovery just for me personally too.
Thanks, Veeda.
I'll give it a shot. I had a similar experience from Lindsay, where it seemed like there's a real lack of literature aimed at that middle grade age when I was that age. And I think I'm the senior member here too, so this is going back a little bit. So my standard joke is that I went from reading Dr. Seuss to reading Dr. No, James Bond. But one thing that did exist back then were short supernatural stories. And I ate those up. So no, I don't know if I ate them up because I already had an affinity for that kind of thing, which is probably part of it, or also that's what existed. So, but that set me on a path the rest of my life. I've been writing supernatural science fiction fantasy ever since then. And I think a lot of that has to do is that's what I was so exposed to that in those middle grade years. And so it kind of it blew up into what became a career.
That's awesome.
Jen,
Jess?
I think a lot of us, I mean, at least for me, I shouldn't speak for everyone, but middle grade, that age is so easy for me to access. I feel like I never completely grew beyond my middle grade years. Like, I was quirky and awkward, and I made a lot of like dad jokes basically, and I was super anxious. I'm actually also a therapist, and so that's something that I try to weave into my story is characters who have anxiety, characters who are dealing with mental health issues, but in a way that younger readers, that it's accessible to them, that it makes sense. In this story, it's a lot lighter, the issues that he's dealing with and how my main character sorts them out. So I think it's easy for me to tap into that time, and then it's easy for me to sort of weave it into the person I became and the professional things that I chose to follow. And I don't know, it's tapping into that part of yourself that makes sense with your art, I guess.
Do you have any good dad jokes for us right now? Like your favorite one?
Even you saying that makes me feel, I'm like, oh no, do I? So that's another part of my
I brought out that anxiety piece.
There it is. I'm like, oh, so.
Go ahead, Jen. I'll go after you.
Okay, thanks, Varian. I always feel like as a kid, I agree with Jess. I agree with all of you. Everybody ages and matures at such different, ages, really. And I felt like there were some kids who were 8 and 9 who were totally had come into their own, and they were really confident, and they projected themselves in this amazing way. They looked amazing to me. And I just was always so unsure of myself. And I also felt like I was the only kid in school who was not good at sports, and everybody else in school played sports. And I felt like I couldn't relate, and I was just trying to find myself. So I feel like I throw that into my characters because I want it to be relatable to kids who are feeling the same way. I mean, we are not all built the same way. We're not all cookie cutter kids. Even in my own house with my own 2 kids, I have one kid who's, an extrovert, very outgoing, will try anything you ask him to try. And I have one who really kind of sits back, wants to take his time and really think about what he's going to do before he does it, and doesn't care if everybody else is doing it. So I want to make sure that there's characters in all my books that will appeal to any kind of kid, that you can see yourself in them, that we don't have to all be the same.
Yeah, yeah. And to add to that, I think, being able to see yourself, a reader being able to see themselves in a book is such an important and is a powerful feeling. For me, when I'm writing, I find that most of my books, I exist in them in some type of way, but I don't know that until after it's written, usually, except for this book. This book is about this 10-year-old kid who loves the game of spades. And I grew up playing spades. It's a card game, it's a trick winning game. It's kind of like hearts, and it's really, really popular in the African-American community. And I grew up playing it and I loved it. And I thought it would be so cool to see this game in a book, this game that I loved and that so many other kids like me loved as well too, while also kind of showing this really big community and how everyone kind of contributes to that community. And that was really, really intentional for this book. And it's usually kind of more on the subconscious when I'm thinking about that.
Awesome. Thank you guys for sharing your middle grade selves with us. Okay, so Jess brought up anxiety. It's no secret that we're, in the midst of a pandemic, right? And we talked earlier before we started this panel that, traditional pandemics usually last about 3 years. So in essence, we're probably in the thick of it. And a lot of our middle grade readers right now are probably feeling a little bit of anxiety. So I want you to think about, the 5-letter word COVID, and think about quarantine, and you can talk about a main character in your book, secondary, or a person that's represented in your book. How do you think that they would deal with a pandemic or COVID? What kind of strengths would bring them through, or what kinds of things do you think would be their undoing, just based on, on the characters that are in your stories?
Oh, I'd love to take this one.
Thank you, Tracey.
So one of the things that I discovered as I was doing this research, I'm sure you can imagine it was massive research and took many years to figure this out. But, there were several different people that I came across in the, figuring out what was happening here, with various people across the African continent. And the thing that I think a lot of these people had in common, even though there were people who were artists in the book, there were people who were military leaders, there were people who were sort of forward-thinking as far as business was concerned, and really from various different aspects of humanity. And they all were really kind of forward thinkers. They were really thinking about what was going to be best for the people around them, and how they were going to move things forward in whatever aspect of their life they were in. So for example, there was this one queen, her name was Idia. She was a queen of Benin. And this was in the 1500s. This was just before kind of the European takeover of various African countries. And being in Benin, she was on the West African coast and saw that the Portuguese were making forays into Africa. There was the trans-Saharan trade route that was really popular at that time, actually popularized by this woman, Tin Hinan. But she was starting to see that the winds of change were coming, and she was preparing for that. So she prepared her young son, Isige, to speak Portuguese, to be able to communicate with these people who were coming from the outside. She was also really well versed in medicines and military strategy and things like that. So I feel like she in particular, various of them in the book, but she in particular would have seen this coming and would have come up with a plan. This is the plan. This is how we're going to approach it. This is how we're going to get ahead of it. And a lot of the people who were really successful, especially like the leaders and especially the people who were military strategists that I talk about in the book, were people who got out ahead of things and who tried things that nobody else had tried before, because they knew something about how this was going to work. And they worked really hard to make sure that they were going to be successful at it. So I feel like, you know, this kind of thing happening, this COVID, this pandemic, you know, would have been something that they would have taken on. You know, they would have gone straight at it, you know, like they would not have shied away from dealing with it at all.
I love that. Such power and forward thinking is such a positive thing, right? Like, okay, we're here now, but let's think about the future. And I feel like that can be hard for middle grade kids too, because, you know, you're so involved in the here and now, right? And what things look like right now to other people. So to have that forward thinking is key.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to chime in on like what they think their characters would be like faced in COVID or quarantine or in the middle of a pandemic?
I can do it. I don't know how helpful this will be, but it's also very fitting. I don't have a copy of the book, but I do have a coaster that a very nice bookseller made for me once. My book Silo. Silo is about a pandemic. It written before the pandemic, and it's about this island that goes into quarantine because there's a pandemic break out. And what did the kids do? And what my main character does is the reason I say it's not very helpful, because it's more fitting as opposed to Tracey's book, which is real conflict and really dealing with reality. This is kind of wish fulfillment of, gee, wouldn't it be great? How could I deal with this on an amazing? He doesn't believe it's real, and he works to figure out what is going on and what the truth is behind it, and uncover something that's way bigger than whatever it is. But it does deal quite a bit with, oh my God, we're all going to die here. And what are we going to do about it? And some people just kind of sit back and let it happen. Other people go to fight. And of course, the main character is the one who puts it all together to figure out, which I say it's not helpful because I don't know how realistic, it's not realistic at all, but it is indicative of a lot of middle grade stories, which is about wish fulfillment and being able to live out a fantasy that you probably might not be able to do in real life, even though we are going through a pandemic. So if there's any kid out there who can solve this pandemic right now, please step forward. That would be awesome.
We need you. And I disagree with you. I think that is helpful because you do need to have that wish fulfillment. You have to have dreams and wishes, right? But hey, that is something that's happening right now too. People thinking that this doesn't exist. It's not really real. And so being able to see that reflected in your characters, even before this even was a thing, that's truth. That's true.
And in his case, he was right, by the way. So it wasn't real.
Okay. Anybody else want to share?
I'll say I have felt very lucky that the timing worked out that I was working on this book during this time, because this story, in the beginning of the story, my character Milton, it starts off by saying he's having the most totally, terribly, horribly, heinously rotten year of all time. So this is a book about a kid who's going through a rough year. It's not a pandemic year, but some things are happening in his life that he would rather not be happening, right? He has to, he starts middle school, his parents are splitting up, his best friends aren't hanging out with him anymore. So he's going through all these things. And one of the themes in the story is that he talks a lot about moving through things that are rotten and being able to find the spectaculous. So it's this idea of sometimes we're going through a rough patch or a hard time, and there's a lot of feelings that go along with that. There can be anxiety. We can wish that it wasn't happening, but being able to find that resilience that is inside of us and that is inside of every kid, and tapping into community and the resources that are there, making new friendships, and for him going on adventures and still sort of living the life that he can to the best of his ability, even though there are constraints. He's, you know, stuck on an island. And so I don't know, that's what I've been thinking the whole time. I'm like, wow, Milton is really giving me a lot of good advice through this pandemic, that I need to just move through the rottenness and find my inner resilience. So I hope kids, when they read it, will take that away too.
Yeah,
No.
it's a hard lesson to learn that things don't always go the way that we plan, right? Or hope.
Yes.
Well, one thing I love about middle grade books is that, I think the majority of them, there's hope at the end. And so while our characters are going through these really difficult, hard times, there is so much resilience and so much that you learn. And, I think about this pandemic that we're going through, we get this chance to have a Zoom conversation with all these authors from New York to Austin, across the nation. And that wasn't as regular before. So, I think, my characters and our characters too, there's just a growth that happens. And even though things are really tough, there are some really beautiful moments too.
I love that positiveness, Veeda. That's awesome. I know I feel super blessed being able to Zoom with people that I wouldn't be able to go and see their events, right? Because I'm here in Vegas, or work restraints, family restraints, right? But I could just log in on a Saturday morning and see people from all over our country. It's awesome. Anybody else want to share about their characters and maybe COVID, pandemic, quarantine?
Sure. I'll say, I've got 2 younger kids, and I think just thinking about anxiety, our kids are always smarter than we think they are, right? And they can feel when we're anxious or we're worried. And so it's always about balancing the truth of a situation in a way that they can digest and that they can use to kind of make informed decisions and be part of a solution. I think about that as a writer, all the time. How can I write something that's respectful of my audience while being, I don't know, appropriate? Sometimes I don't like that word, but while being written in a way that's truthful, but also respectful. And then playing the cards you're dealt, Ant is dealing with a lot of family secrets, and he can sense that the secrets are there, but he's not privy to them, which just causes more anxiety. So I think for me and for Ant, just thinking about where we are in COVID, what the world looks like, how we're dealing with it in our communities, and being truthful about it, I think it's really, really important. And obviously it applies to things outside of COVID as well.
Thank you, Varian. I know kids are so much smarter than we give them credit for, right?
Exactly.
And giving them that option of hope, right? Letting them see, yeah, we're in a tough times. We're going to have that forward thinking. We're going to move on. I know, especially being a teacher, an elementary school librarian, I've got to be there for my kids. I don't know what they're experiencing at home, and I just have to bring it, right? We have to bring that hope element.
Yeah.
Jen, Lindsay, do you want to weigh in on this question?
Yeah, the only thing first of all, everything you guys said just really resonated with me. I don't know if you could see me nodding my head over here, but especially the comments about hope and middle grade. And the other thing that well, for me personally, my characters, since all of my books are spooky, they are not strangers to being put in horrible situations. My characters are typically trying to solve some sort of mystery that's really desperate because there's a ghost or something awful after them. And the one thing I like about that is that it gives me an opportunity to craft really resourceful characters who find some sort of deep well of bravery in themselves that maybe they didn't know they had. And the other thing I really love about middle grade, so not just my books, but a lot of middle grade, is I do think that parents are in the books a bit more than young adults sometimes. And I really love to have that parental unit, whatever it looks like. Maybe it's just mom, maybe it's just dad, maybe it's whoever, maybe it's grandma. But I like to have that in my books, and also some version of friends or a friend unit or something, so that my characters do have someone to rely on and to talk to, and someone to bounce things off of, so that kids reading my books feel like I don't have to keep this stuff bottled up. If there's something bad going on, I need to find someone to share this with. Maybe it's mom and dad, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a counselor at school, whatever it is. And so I do think that's great about middle grade, is that we have the opportunity to do this, I guess, to have all of this in here without it feeling lame. Maybe in young adult, there's always kind of an opportunity to get those parents out of there the first chance you get. But in middle grade, I think we can get away with it a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I
I
have
agree.
oh, sorry,
Go
Jen.
ahead, Nikki. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, I have middle grade children myself, right? And there's no way they can kick you out, right? They just don't have, like you said, the resources was your key word there. They just don't have those resources to be independent necessarily like that. So they, some kind of parental figure is always kind of looming in the background at those ages. And then, of course, just being in the library, I'm all about using your resources. Look at how resourceful we had to be at the start of this pandemic. We're all on a Zoom call, right? To make it work for the book festival, like showing kids to be resourceful and resilient and all of this. I love all your keywords. That's awesome. Thank you, Jen. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, I was just going to say, I agree with everyone, but also I think like with characters, but also with real kids, it's important for them to realize they're not alone. And even in their darkest hour, you can reach out to someone else and find someone who can understand what you're going through. Even in the start of the pandemic, when we couldn't see anyone at all, when Zoom was just starting out, I remember being like the mom who was like setting up these like group Zoom calls with the kids like once a week to like chat or like have a conversation, and we'd all leave the room just so you could feel connected. Because I think that has been a problem with the pandemic, people feeling really isolated and alone and just in front of a screen all the time. And I think that's been the great thing about middle grade books is escapism too. Just kind of getting out of the real world for a little bit and diving into a book with characters that whether you can relate to or not relate to, that just take you on this great adventure and let you think and feel something else for a little while. And I think that's important too.
Mm-hmm. Connection is key. And all of your books bring that connection for the readers, right? It doesn't matter if they're 8-year-old, an adult, right? That's reading it, like having some kind of connection to what's in your novels. I think that's awesome. Thank you guys for those answers. Okay, so I think of myself as a middle grade age person. Like, MTV was super popular, right? So think about our middle grade readers today and like what's popular social media. So my question to you, and it doesn't have to be too involved, is TikTok hot or not?
I'm going to take this, even though I just spoke, because during the pandemic, my kids were like, Mom, you need to get on TikTok. And I was like, I don't even know what I would do. I don't know what I would say. So my youngest was like, I'll do a video of you. And so he did an unboxing video of my new book. And I had like 50 followers. So I was in my bathrobe, my hair was like this. And I was like, fine, just do it. He puts it up. He adds music. It hit like 70,000 views and I gained like 3,000 followers. I have no idea how it happened. It hasn't happened since. And I was like, great. The one video you put up there of me is me looking like my worst self, but I guess it was real. So it worked. So I do try it because I do think book talk is an interesting thing with the kids, but I don't understand it. I usually let my kids do my videos for me.
Hey, but I'm going to let you go back to that. My keyword for you is resourceful, right? And connection. And so Lindsay talked about using your resources. You talked about connection and you just, bam, worked it together, right? Anyways, we can get books and ideas of books in kids' hands. That's key. All right. TikTok, hot or not?
Jen, God bless you for getting on TikTok, right? I had to be dragged onto Instagram, and I feel like that's about as cool as I can be. I will say my daughters, they'll show me the TikTok dances and we'll do some sometimes, but the idea of getting on it and navigating it is anxiety, is stressful. So I applaud anyone who ever says anything about me on TikTok. I don't know if they do or not because I'm not on there, but I'm thankful for it anyway. And I figured that's good enough for me.
We'll do one together, Varian, when we're finally together again.
We're finally together, yes. Okay.
You heard it here first. Collab between Jen and Varian on TikTok coming soon.
We're going to hold you guys to that now. It's funny, the way I look at all of it, though, a lot of social media, especially the newer things, or newer to me, like TikTok, which I am light years behind Jen and still haven't really quite figured out. It seems random, but I'm sure it's someone is controlling it. I just don't know how, but I feel like it is one more way for readers to kind of interact with you in a way. I do a ton of school presentations during the year, and those are so wonderful, but often it's this huge auditorium of kids or classes of kids. I mean, during COVID, obviously it's been individual classes or even kids logging in from their homes. And when it's large numbers like that, you get to a Q&A section, it's really hard to be able to interact with that many kids one-on-one. And so having, being available on different social media platforms is just one more way for them, I think, to reach out and say, hi, I read your book, I liked your book, or hi, you came to my school, or whatever. And I know at that age, for me, that would have meant the world. I grew up in a really small town surrounded by cornfields. We never had an author visit. I never would have had an author say something to me. I think maybe that kind of encouragement goes a long way. So that's the reason I try these new things, as awkward and horrible as I am at them, because the kids don't seem to react that way. I mean, they seem to be like, oh, yay, you're here, not, oh, wow, don't ever do that again. So
I love that. I know I still get geeked out. I'm a 40-plus-year-old woman. And if somebody likes my post or something, an author that I admire and cherish, I'm like, oh my gosh, right? Like, I mean, it's that connection. Anybody else want to weigh in on TikTok, hot or not?
I mean, I'll say I have a TikTok account and I watch TikToks. I have never posted a video because I just, a lot of social media for me is very anxiety producing. You know, like we're talking about anxiety and the kind of anxiety that we've all had, especially, you know, like during the pandemic. And my anxiety that I have already had really ramped up quite a bit during the pandemic. So the idea of, you know, then adding like a social media component on top of the kind of work that we do. And a lot of our work, like, you know, it used to be, I don't know when, but it used to be at some point, right, that authors would write books and that the books would go out and that they would just be like in their palatial homes, right, and not have to like do anything. But a lot of what we do now is like very forward facing. And, you know, if you're like me and you have a lot of anxiety, you know, like that's a lot. And the social media component is like you post something and then you're waiting for the validation, right, of people to come back and like and comment and things like that. And even just the waiting for it and the going back and looking for it is very anxiety producing. So for me, like I approach social media in general, like kind of very slowly. And I try to be like very gentle about it. And TikTok for me feels like a step that I am not quite yet ready to take. So I'm like very much easing myself into it. So I have the account and I will go in and I will watch other people's videos and I'll hit the heart. But I am not quite at the point where I feel like I can really post something yet. I'm like, that'll probably come, you know, at some point, and it'll probably be somebody else posting for me, which is fine. Like, I'm going to be like you, Varian, like somebody else do it. And I will be like, yay. But that's, yeah, it's as far as I can get for now.
I think that's a true and honest answer, because we're going to have readers at home listening to this being like, yeah, I'm more like Tracey, or I'm more like Jen, or I'm more like Lindsay. Like they'll be able to connect to you that way and see like that's the kind of type of person I am. Anybody else want to weigh in on that question?
Yeah, I will. I think it's hot and not. Just like all of the internet and all of social media. I'm in the Varian school where level I've gone to is Instagram. I'm okay with that. That's controlled and whatnot. Well, I have a daughter who's 18, just dropped her off at college. Very bittersweet. But during the pandemic, and I think this is one of the reasons that TikTok just exploded, is because she was in her bedroom a lot and she's on TikTok for hours. So while I certainly recognize the promotional aspects of getting your whatever it is out in front of a lot of people, and that's awesome, there's also a lot. She would come to me and say, did you know that fill in the blank? And it's like, where did you get that from? TikTok. And it's totally false. It's like, what? You have to consider this, and that's just not TikTok, that's social media and the internet in general. So it's really kind of dangerous. So I've always felt this: if something gets published that online that's in a font, suddenly that's given credibility. It's like, well, it must be real. Look, it's in a font and it's nicely formatted, so it must be real. So and TikTok is so huge. So I see both sides to it, and I don't know where the balance is, but oh boy, there have been some real false, scary information that's being sent as well as the important stuff that deserves to be out there. So I think you have to approach it really cautiously as a viewer, as a consumer, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, just being a librarian in a time where people are thinking, oh, we don't really need librarians anymore. Like, we're more needed than ever, right? Because of those kinds of issues, teaching kids to be internet savvy, right? And really looking at the balance, fact checking things, finding the credibility and everything.
And don't let your children put you on TikTok in your bathrobe.
Exactly.
Put on makeup or
No, it's a good thing.
All right. Anybody else want to weigh in on that? All right. So let's bring it back to our panel. This is a middle grade fiction panel for every reader. So to sum up our time together, I want you to just take a moment and do your plug, right, to our middle grade reader that's watching. Like, why is this a good book for you? Like, what kinds of things in your book is going to make this the must read for our middle grade readers?
Oh, heck, I'll go for it. I'll speak of all my books in general. My books, everything I've ever written, whether it be television, I've done a lot of television, I'm doing television again, or books, is that the common theme is it's kids being self-reliant. It's being faced with a challenge, usually a bigger than life challenge, because that's fun. It's more fun than real life challenges. And being able to solve problems and in a fun way. And all my books are like that. Now, all my books have mysteries. And this is kind of funny. When I said I couldn't find one of my books, speaking of mysteries, I couldn't find my first Pendragon book, but I did find this is book 9. And as I pulled the book out, I'm like, oh, what's this thing? Something fell out. Somebody had sent me this book with an envelope that it's probably been there for 3 years. And I'm afraid to open this up because I don't know, some reader sent this to me. They're probably waiting for it to be signed. And I'm not going to open it up here because it's probably going to be like, I don't want to know what that is. But they're mysteries, and they're filled with kids. We were all talking about the same thing. It's kids who are no matter who they are, no matter what their background is, no matter what their experience is, they're faced with conflicts and challenges and sometimes they'll fail, sometimes they'll succeed. Usually by the end they succeed. but that's what's fun. If you like mysteries, you like an adventure, all my books do. I think all of our books do that, frankly. But my books definitely do that. And if you want a rollicking good adventure, try me. The Pendragon or Morpheus Road or Silo or The Library. I've got so many they're just fun stories that hopefully you can relate to.
Thank you, DJ. Just so you know, I will, as a librarian, I will be using all of your statements to plug your books for my students. Fun, rollicking adventure with self-reliant characters. Got it.
Oh boy. For me, Playing the Character Dealt is a really, really fun book. Like, let me back up. It deals with some heavy things as well, too. It touches on themes of toxic masculinity, and how it navigates that, but in like a really, really fun way. And there's lots of humor. I laugh. There's so many dad and like even like granddad jokes in there. I chuckled. So hopefully other readers will enjoy it as well too. And I think, a book can be many, many things. It could touch on heavier topics, but it could also be entertaining and lighthearted and fun. And hopefully this book is that for all readers. They can find something in it that they enjoy. But I just have to say, I'm so excited for Tracey's book. And let me say why, right? Ever since Black Panther came out, right, and we see Wakanda, and like, okay, yeah, sure, they have a vibranium, right? And that makes all the difference in the world. Yes. But like, if you think about this world that had not been colonized, what would it have looked like? And I love this idea of looking at people of African descent before colonization and the power.
Oh, are you guys losing Varian too?
Yeah. Are you losing?
Oh no, he froze.
Oh gosh, I'm so
The
sorry.
key moment.
You were like killing it too. Tracy's like, yes.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, well, I'll shut up. Tracy can talk about her book. I'm just really excited about it. Sorry you lost me.
No, that's okay. We love it. We're sold. We were like in there with you. And I 100% agree. Like so often we think of our African-American community as just slaves, and that's just not true. So it's good for kids to see.
Yeah, so I should probably go next.
Follow up, please.
Yeah, so I mean, and thank you, Varian, so much. And this is kind of why I wanted to do this book. Like I am, better known for writing fiction and writing fantasy. But I was just kind of sick and tired of my kids coming home every February 1st with the Black History Month sheet of questions, and I just got really fed up of that. And I was like, there's got to be something better. There's got to be some more stuff. And when I started digging into it, we realized that there wasn't a book that was like this at all. And there are a lot of kids, like my son, for example, who really, really loves nonfiction and really is that kid who wants informational text, but wants it in still a very juicy kind of language, like still wants all of the information, but in really beautiful language. And so that's kind of what I tried to do with this one. And I also made it so that, the pieces are really short. Like you can read the entire thing front to back, you can skip around, but there's also, great maps that sort of explain what the African continent actually looks like. And the illustrator, Hilary Wilson, did a really great job of like doing these amazing portraits of all of the people. So, it's a really beautiful book to look at, in addition to being informative and on a topic that just hasn't been covered for this age group. So yeah, and it was sort of very much that whole, like the whole Wakanda thing, right? Like what really would this continent have been like? And what would all of these various countries have looked like if it wasn't for European colonization? Like what did they have? And it was incredible. I mean, like the things that I came away with knowing was it just, like I had never had that information before. Like I did not know so many of these things, like the culture was so great and so deep and so wonderful. And I just didn't have that experience. So I think kids will like it for that reason.
I know they will. I love the idea of narrative nonfiction because I think it's so important for kids to understand truth, but in a storytelling format, if you will, right? Just that narrative. And you said juicy. I actually had a student. I actually had a student come up to me at the library the other day and say, Ms. Streets, do you have any juicy books? I'm going to totally put this book in her hand and say the author herself said it was juicy. I just want to remind everybody at home watching, just make sure that you are on mute for us. I don't have control of it. Crystal, can you help us out with that? Thank you. All right. Anybody else? You got to give us your plug so we can hand it to the kids so we can get your books in their hands.
I'll do a quick book talk.
Okay.
All right. So The Adventure Is Now. I told you guys a little bit about how Milton P. Green has had the most totally, terribly, horribly, heinously rotten year of all time. And then he gets a letter in the mail. And the letter is from his uncle, who is an ecologist on a remote island in the southern Atlantic Ocean. And his uncle says, come spend the summer with me. And Milton doesn't want to go because Milton really just wants to spend the summer playing. This is sort of a Nintendo Switch-like device that I have in the book. And he has this game that he loves. It's called Isle of Wild. And he likes to pretend that he is the main character, Seahawk. And when he pretends to be Seahawk, he doesn't have to feel anxious and nervous, and he doesn't have to think about what's going on. So that's like his escape route. And then he comes to this island and there's no electricity there. And there's, all new people that he has to meet. He has to, deal with his thoughts and think them actually. But then he finds a field guide. And something I'm really excited about with this book is that there is an actual guide in the back of the book. So I got to invent all these plants and animals that Milton has to encounter on this wild and wondrous journey that he goes on through the jungle of the Lone Island, accompanied by a few friends, and he has to solve clues, and the clues are in the field guide as well. So readers get to read about the field guide, they get to solve the clues, and they get to help Milton save this island that he finds himself on. So it's a really fun book. Again, with a lot of humor, with a lot of dad jokes, but I think that kids will appreciate them.
Awesome. Jess and Tracey, I love that you shared that your books have some visual components to it, because kids eat that up. If they just see words on page, sometimes some readers might shy away from that, but having those visual aids and cues, that's so helpful, at least to my readers. Veeda, Lindsay, Jen?
I'll go. So I call it the magic of the pandemic. Somehow I have 2 books coming out 3 weeks apart. This is The Rise of Flynn Rider, which I was telling you about before, an origin story for Eugene Fitzherbert. It's really a buddy comedy. I don't know if it's really dad jokes, but there's a lot of like early Eugene Flynn jokes in it. Really him and his best friend Arnwaldo Schnitz, if you know him from the Tangled TV show, just going on this epic adventure. They're really each other's family. And I think that's true of a lot of kids. Like your best friend is your family. And so I just loved getting to do this kind of buddy comedy with them. And then I write this fairy tale series, Fairy Tale Reform School and Royal Academy Rebels. This is a mashup of a reform school and a Royal Academy who don't really like each other too much, having to team up to take down a really big villain threat. So both books set in the fairy tale world, a little something for everybody.
Thank you, Jen.
Does Flynn learn how to smolder in your book?
Yes, he does. It's the origin of the smolder.
Well, okay, so Lee on Angel Island it's geared towards the younger kids. So this is actually a very short book. So kids, this is like 5 chapters long. So it's very doable. It's also illustrated. So I'm going to share this if you can even see it here. So because this is historical fiction, it's based on actual history. And on Angel Island in the 70s, there's this one park person, and he discovered that there was these, Chinese inscriptions on the wall. And it turns out that was poetry from the immigrants who were detained on Angel Island. And so it was like so fascinating to, use that research and hear about their experience. So, it's an immigrant story, but it's a very short story with pictures. There's back matter at the end. And there aren't that many historical fiction books for Asian Americans. So, if you want to learn more about history, but also like, it's about this girl, Lee, who has to, pass this test before she can join her father on Angel Island. And so, there's this like, is she going to pass? What does she have to do? So, so I hope kids will find like, you can read history and it's not, hopefully it's not like a dry book. I feel like it's also a very fun read too.
Thank you, Veeda. All right, Lindsay, you're up.
Woo! Well, I'm super hooked on all of the books. You guys gave such a good pitch that my brain was like racing the whole time. For some reason, I was like, why read my book? What am I supposed to say here? So What Lives in the Woods, this is the next one I have coming out. And I would say that if you like mysteries, I love mystery. It's one of my favorite genres, mainly because I love the act of trying to piece together clues and see what I can figure out before the character, if it's possible. And I especially love it when I'm completely stumped or when something blindsides me and I just didn't see it coming. And I love that piece of writing books too. And the other thing that I really love about the kind of spooky stories that I write is that there's always an element of history in them. So my previous 2 titles took place here in Chicago, which is, if you don't know, extremely haunted. Half of my neighborhood used to be a big old graveyard, and there's still about 10 to 12,000 bodies buried underneath everything here. Our stores, our parks. My son's playing soccer right now on a field that was an old graveyard as well. And I love digging up, excuse the pun, but I love digging up all of that spooky history and those legends. And I love weaving them into stories in a way that makes that history maybe a little less dry and a little bit more accessible. And I think the ghosts and all of that are a great kind of like hook and vehicle for a little bit more like that history. So What Lives in the Woods doesn't take place in Chicago, though. It actually takes place in a small town called Saugatuck, Michigan. I was there supposedly writing something else when people who lived in the area started filling my head with stories of something that lived in the woods and this rumor of a mad scientist and these mutated creatures. And because I am literally like a dog seeing a squirrel, I was like, legend? I'm gonna go check it out. And so even though it's perhaps a little bit more fictionalized and a little bit more inspired by the history in that area than some of my other books that really does work in some actual history, it is still there. And I think that when kids read it, hopefully they will be tempted to do their own research on the area in the book and maybe their own towns, because all of our cities and towns have some really cool history.
100%. I mean, I'm just thinking of Las Vegas. We have a really super cool history, right? And even just our state in general with lots of ghost towns around, like so much potential there. Okay,
I may have to come there.
Oh, well, you're going to have to come. That's okay. We're all going to get together in face-to-face at some point. We're going to redo this middle grade panel in real life someday. So our middle grade readers out there, or anybody else that is watching, like you heard it, like all of their stories are for all of you. But if you're looking for historical fiction, fun, realistic, if you're looking for nonfiction, adventure, fantasy, something a little bit spooky and ominous, like, hey, you've got plenty of choices to pick from here. So we encourage you to hit your libraries, order from your local bookstores, get those books in your hands any way that you can, because we want you to enjoy these stories. You guys, thank you so much for a lovely Saturday morning. Like, this has been delightful. I appreciate all of you and all of your stories, and just thank you for giving the Las Vegas Book Festival your time. We know that, like you said, Lindsay, your son's out playing soccer right now, but you chose to be here with us, and we just really, really appreciate you. So stay happy, healthy, and safe, and just thank you from Las Vegas.
Thank you, Nikki. Great job.
Oh,
Thanks,
thank you.
everyone.
Thanks, Nikki. Good job.
Thanks so much, Nikki.
Bye, guys.
I'm not sure if like Crystal's gonna end it or not. Like, Crystal? Let's see. I think she said she lost. Brian, is that you? Brian is one of our coordinators for the Las Vegas Book Festival, the BG down there. So you can say hi to Brian.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, that was me interrupted very loudly earlier. I apologize.
No worries. There always has to be one, Brian.
There's only one Brian.
I don't want to keep you anymore. I just, excuse me, I text Crystal that we were done because I think she lost some audio there. So really, thank you again, you guys. And I'll see you sometime in real life. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you all.
Bye.